everybody. Welcome to another episode of Ancient Mysteries Unearthed. I'm your host, Chris Noble, and today's guest is Martin Melchizedek. He's an author, researcher, and a messenger of divine insight who brings forward a vision of humanity's coming golden age, which we talk about a lot on this show. So we're going to have some really interesting conversations. Now, his work centers on non-duality, oneness, and the remembrance that love, mercy, and compassion are not just spiritual ideals, but also evolutionary technologies for the next phase of human consciousness. Martin speaks of a profound planetary shift, an ascended era, where that's often been described in many ancient traditions as heaven on earth, where fear dissolves and the soul expands into higher dimensions of awareness. His message invites us to step beyond division into harmony with each other, with the earth, and of course, with the greater cosmos unfolding of our species. So without further ado, let's welcome Martin to Ancient Mysteries on Earth. How are you doing today, Martin?
Hey, Chris, I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really love those things that you just hit on the intro. That's the stuff that gets me excited every day when I get up in the morning.
Absolutely, right. And it's a wonderful motive for all your work and a mission behind it. And on that note, what started that path? And we were going to talk a lot about where you've obviously got to today and a lot about this golden age. But before we get into that, I think it'd be great for our audience to hear a bit more of your journey. What got you on this path? Because it's not a traditional one, that's for sure.
No, not at all. Just to go back to the very beginning, Chris, as you see, I bear the main name Melchizedek. This is not my first rodeo here on Earth and doing things like this. So I am an incarnated priest for the Order of Melchizedek. And so this is something I've been doing for thousands, and many thousands of years. And as I came into this life, my purpose is to help humanity protect the collective conscious and just help us get into that golden age. One of the first things that hit for me, I grew up in the Christian tradition, and it was not just a very Bible doctrinated type of background. It's something where took the words of Jesus as a spiritual leader, not as a quote unquote God or someone to worship. So all the key messages came through from a very early age, and I've been trying to apply that throughout my life. As I got a little bit older, kind of fell off the really beautiful golden track, got tied down with all the things that you go through in life. And it wasn't until like the last 2 years, a little bit less than 2 years, where the awakening happened. And I see all the things that I have to do. Metatron appeared to me in a dream and started showing me some of the things I had to do, some of the things I could be doing. And then Kuan Yin has been my biggest spiritual guide. I have many others that I work with, but Kuan Yin really is the closest guide that I've worked with, and one of the very first also.
Amazing. And so now, as you're working with bringing about this golden age, let's talk about that first. What does a golden age look like? Maybe for someone who's a little more newer to this concept. What does that on a practical level look like on planet Earth?
Sure. One of the things that comes out when you're in that golden age, as humanity goes into what some call it 5D, I call it heaven on earth, at least in the initial stages of the transition. And it's about everything works. People work together. People are kind and compassionate to each other. Your health is well maintained. There's no scarcity. You don't have a scarcity of food. You don't have a scarcity of shelter or scarcity of health. And as you build your light body, you actually will be able to heal yourself, and you won't have to go for anything external. And there's other things that will be really important in the new golden age. One of them is there'll be telepathy, and you'll be able to interact with people in what I call the oneness, what I refer to. And so it'll be something where people will know each other and they'll have an idea. There's some people who really push this, like Diana Cooper is great on this subject. And she tells stories of how if there's a kid who wants to join a soccer game that's going on, in a playground, it won't be a competitive, well, can I get in? Is there room for me? Everyone will come together knowing that this person wants to be part of it, and then they can join into the game, and it'll be about having fun and not about competition, not about scarcity, not about trying to do one up. It'll be about everyone working and living together. Those are really some of the key things that I see.
I love that, Martin. And it's funny you say that little sports analogy. I think it's such a good example, though, of on a small level how I really believe as a species we are, I think, really designed to cooperate and work together. It's just we get traumatized and we get programmed and we get pitted against one another. So then we are how we are now. But I think at our core, we all want that. We all want to feel that inclusion and that connection and that love, of course, with all living things. And so we've also got so much technology going on, of course, these days. We've got AI, we've got incredible quantum computing and so many other things. And of course, all the private, let's say, technologies that will likely be coming to light with disclosure and all this other stuff.
Right.
How does the technology, Martin, interact with this new golden age? Do we have to get rid of all of it? Can we incorporate it into this heaven on earth? How does that work?
I see this in two parts. From what I gather from Metatron, at some point, while the technology is great, you won't necessarily need it because each human, in their purest, most developed form, using their Merkaba, has no need for the technology, basically, or limited need. Now, that's not something that's going to happen if you look at the cycles of time. 2012 to 2032 is the big transition period. 2032, we go from things falling apart. 2032 to 2052, that's a window where things can start building up really nicely. It doesn't mean that magic happens and in 2033 everything is just perfect. In that transition period, that's where that technology and working with other species, other races, visitors, that's where all the beauty of that will come in.
You mentioned, I think correct me if I'm wrong, Metatron, not just Metatron, sorry, well, I'm just blanking on the geometric shape you just mentioned, but, what were you saying? There was some form Merkaba, a Merkaba.
Yes, the Merkaba.
Now, that reminds me a lot of things I've come across in ancient Egypt, of course, many ancient cultures. One of the ways that I've been learning that they may have, let's for lack of a better term, traveled with their consciousness was to visualize some kind of a Merkaba in their meditation to be able to travel and attain other levels of consciousness, perhaps. What's your understanding of the Merkaba and how this is going to be a part of our everyday life? Sounds like also a form of technology or a tool, but just maybe a higher dimensional one.
Right. There's two parts to it, and Chris, you hit on one of the parts that Archangel Metatron really pushes right now, and that is using your consciousness and putting your consciousness in your Merkaba. And when you're doing that, you literally can travel anywhere, whether it's through time and space to other locations on the planet. You can use it to go to higher dimensions. So many choices. There's also a physical component to the Merkaba, which is the light body, the crystal light body. And that's something that will come in, and it involves, and it's a big piece of going into the golden age in the fifth dimensional human, where we're carbon-based organisms, carbon-based life forms now, will become silicon-based life forms so that we'll live on light as opposed to living on food for energy. And part of that is a restructuring of the cells so that the way the electrons and the protons work together and are structured, it's no longer carbon-based, it becomes silicon-based. And once you do that,
Yeah.
it becomes a physical light body that has even more capabilities than just what you can do with your consciousness. And I have
And
lots of stories and comments about Egyptians and using their consciousness to travel.
yeah, I mean, it seemed also in conjunction with some of these ancient buildings, let's say, that would maybe enhance or help with that. But certainly they had it dialed in with their own consciousness. And, it's interesting with that too, because it sounds like we really are moving into an element of rediscovering, I think is the key word, because we've always had this inner technology. What also comes with this heaven on earth with regards to our bodies? I know that we only have these two strands of DNA currently. I hear a lot about the 12 strands opening up. We've got 98.7% roughly of our DNA is all quote unquote junk, offline DNA. What's going to happen with that? Like, how does you mentioned obviously we're turning into this more crystalline, more silicone based body. Does that mean we're going to look physically different? Are we going to be shining, radiating?
My vision, what I've seen in visions of this, is that we will literally be shining beings, that it won't necessarily look like the current human body, but there'll be a radiance to it. Part of that's been talked about in traditions of our holy people and the ascended masters, where they will glow. And that's one piece of it. But I think there's a bigger piece as you switch to the crystalline light body, the diamond light body, and the energy from the light will literally shine out. I've seen it as rings of light working together. And of
Incredible.
course, going to 12 strands of DNA is one of the first steps. There can be more. You can get up to like 42, 44 strands of DNA. But at that point, you become a very different being. You start seeing the stories of the giants, and people are 70 and 100 feet tall. Those type of beings have all 44 strands for their DNA activated.
Interesting. So when you get these, like in the Bible, the Nephilim as an example, right? That would be an example of these. They likely had way more strands of DNA turned on.
Right. As you're looking at the historic stories of giants, they had more of their DNA turned on. And also,
Fascinating.
some of those may not have actually been human. So it goes hand in hand. More DNA activated, not necessarily the human as we know it.
So then, as we're evolving and we're becoming more luminous and we're clearly ascending into higher levels of consciousness, does that mean we are now able to interact with other beings on a more regular basis that are already at that other level of consciousness?
Absolutely. The answer to that is yes. And the question is your question about now, or is your question about in the coming future? I think the
Well,
answer to that is yes for both.
yeah, exactly. Because it is a question of now, because we've got so much discussion, of course, about ETs, extraterrestrials, and when are they going to get more acknowledged by the public, so to speak, or by the powers that be. But yeah, of course, moving on, the way I look at it, because I look into our past to get a sense of our future a little bit. When you look at times in ancient Egypt and ancient India and many, many, many other cultures, it seems that they were having daily normal interactions with the quote unquote gods. In other words, other beings, right? It seemed very
Right.
normal, like a normal part of their life.
Absolutely. And Chris, that's one thing I just want to highlight and bring up really early is in the English language, the word God, I think, doesn't get used in a way that's helpful in a lot of these discussions. And so as we've translated God and we've convoluted God with God Almighty, so that we're not really having a clear delineation. I think the concept of Elohim as powerful ones is a much better way to look at the Anunnaki, or you look at the Hindu um, Krishna and some of these other beings. These are clearly, in my understanding, what we would call aliens today. And I don't think that we should look at all of that has gone on with them as being aliens in a true sense, because a lot of those people right now, as they embrace the idea of being starseeds, they see a transition from being Valerian or being from the Pleiades and now being human. And I think that you'll see some of the Anunnaki details as it comes out, the Krishna, many of the beings that have been quoted as gods are actually earlier versions of what are now either incarnated or working with humans as ascended masters.
Fascinating. So some of these other species that from what I have heard so many times from other researchers and ancient texts, have come to this planet, have either interacted with us or experimented with us in various different ways in our genetics and whatnot. And our DNA and genetics can certainly show that we've got a a lot of different things going on within our
Right.
DNA for sure. So you're saying though that some of these ancient cultures, let's just say the Anunnaki is a good example here. They certainly did want to come around and tinker and tweak, and whether it was based on ego or based on other things, they did a lot of work. They certainly left their footprint. And you're saying that are you saying the consciousness that was in some of these, let's just throw out some names like Enki or Enlil, they're coming back in human bodies? Or
Yeah,
what
I
do you
don't want to
mean?
get that specific with them, but I believe when you look at many of the major religions, and maybe Krishna would be a better example, I believe you can tie Krishna to some of the souls or the soul structures that are still working with Earth now as ascended masters.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I've heard things like Osiris could have been, maybe reincarnated later as Yeshua or Jesus or things like that. Like these ascended masters have a particular consciousness frequency, and that frequency will continue to manifest in different future lifetimes, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. And there's several sources who talk about some of the soul structures, and Lord Sonata obviously is one of the most interesting ones, and that includes Jesus, obviously. But there's so many different ways that that soul structure isn't understood properly, and that's one of the things that I'm still working through. So you have a monad, a local monad, you have an oversoul, and a soul. And so when the soul wants to experience more of the planet or more of experience, as I understand it, it'll put out 6 pairs of twin flames that are basically 12 miniature versions of it. So the analogy has been fingers from the soul being put out into incarnation to experience more of the oneness, more of the existence. And so if you have a soul that's done that enough, it goes from being an oversoul with 12 to being a monad with 144 souls that are out doing these things. And so you see some of the more active souls, especially as they become oversouls and monads, they're very active and they've got a lot of different lifetimes where they have done things where I don't necessarily see it as a reincarnation cycle per se, but I see it as various aspects of an oversoul that are very active, trying to make things make an impact here on the earth.
That's fascinating. So it's instead of the concept of we call past lives or parallel lives, it could also just be simultaneous lives of the same consciousness experiencing itself in different iterations, essentially, different
Yes,
versions.
both. Yes, Chris, both. So
Okay.
if the oversoul has 12 different identities that it can choose from as individual souls that are interacting, so that individual soul, which is one of the 12 extensions of the oversoul, it could do, it could be Lao Tzu in one lifetime, and then it could be MacArthur in another lifetime. And it goes through time. There's going to be a team of 12 that are out doing things for this oversoul.
Hmm.
And I think one of the things that's kind of challenging to understand is each of those 12 different extensions of that oversoul, it's the same soul of the oversoul. So while they may be different, they're still the same in the oneness. And as they draw back into the oversoul, all these different lives and experiences are of the oversoul. And so, depending on how you're looking at it, do you look at it as, okay, so this is Martin's incarnation in this lifetime? And when have I had simultaneous previous incarnations? That is this piece of my oversoul doing things. And which of those previous incarnations are other aspects of my oversoul doing things here on Earth? And that's something that I'm working through right now. I find that to be a fascinating subject.
That is, it's definitely a mind boggler for I'm sure a lot of people out there. But that's fascinating. I mean, we're moving into a more multi-dimensional reality where time ceases to be like linear time, right? So of course it makes sense that we could be having all this multiple experiences at once, multiple lifetimes at once. And from your perspective, with all this research, Martin, what do you think is this purpose, for lack of a better term, of these souls, of our souls living all these different lives, is all these different expressions? What is it? Simply a game that we're all here to play, or what do you think's going on?
All right, that's a great question, Chris. That's one of my favorites. It all goes back to the very key concept of oneness. In the beginning, the source, the all that is, wanted to experience more of itself. And so to do that, it created extensions, soul extensions that went out to have individual experiences. And that goes on and on and on. So here is your having experiences in this lifetime. We are extensions going up through the oversoul to the monad, all the way up to the top level to source itself. And so we are individual fractals of source here on this planet, having experiences for our oversoul, for our monad, but ultimately for source. So as we have interactions with other people, it's not other people, it's not separate existences. It's pieces of source, individual fractals of source, looking at things from a different viewpoint. So even the people you don't like are still source, doing something for source. And maybe that fractal of source has more experience than you do as a soul. Maybe it has less experience as a soul. And you may see souls doing things that you think are kind of awful. So the key for me is not to judge them, not to say, boy, wow, that's bad, and I'm going to talk negative about you. It's simply to say, I don't agree with what's going on. And so the way Metatron explains it is see them as being souls who might be immature, having an experience, learning something that my soul may have learned 1,000,000 years ago in a linear time frame in another planet. Let that soul have its experience. Don't judge it. Metatron describes them as spiritual infants. And if it's an infant here on Earth, we don't get mad if that infant poops its pants and makes a mess in its diaper. We just change the diaper, clean it up, and help it to grow. And that's one of the approaches that I think is so important as you look at all the different things going on, even in the chaos today. This chaos is going on so that we have an experience, so that the collective, the human collective, can say, all this yucky stuff that's going on, that's not for us. We want this over here. We want to go get some heaven on earth and live at this higher level of joy and bliss.
I love that, Martin. I fully agree that we're going through growing pains right now, and it's not to belittle the suffering, of course, that lots are experiencing and the chaos, but I do get excited because I feel that with all this negativity going on, all of us, everyone really has just kind of had enough of it. And that's what we need to change. We need to feel like, okay, enough of the old. Let's move into something new. I don't know what, but I know we can't go backwards. We got to move forward. So I do see that absolutely happening. And, with regards to the kind of going back to this, let's say the cycles of evolution that happen, at least on this planet, what's been your understanding for the cycles and rises and fall of human consciousness? I've heard some theories that although we seem to always go in these 12,500, let's say, cycles, the ancient Vedas call it the Yuga cycles. There's many,
Right.
many names for it. And that's a cycle we've been going on for a long, long time. Is that what you have correlated to this golden age? Do you use that same measurement of time? And is it a cycle that lasts forever, or can we break the cycle and just perpetually live in a golden age forever?
Well, that's a great question, Chris. Whether we can break this and live in that golden age forever. One of the things that you will see is that there are what has been described as the in-breath and out-breath of source. And so that will be many millions, billions of years. And so I'm not sure if we can really do this forever, but one of the things that will happen is once we get to that fifth dimensional level, then everything changes because everyone who's living at that level has greater abilities, greater spiritual abilities, physical abilities. And when you enter into the oneness at that level, the only choice you want to make is what has been termed the God choice, the yes for humanity, yes for positivity, yes for kindness, yes for compassion. And all the things that we see today that we don't like, you would never even want to do that if it even occurred to you to do it, because your soul will be vibrating at a level where that's just not an option. Now, in terms of the cycles of time, one of the things I understand is that there is going to be a continuation, and Gaia will go from being a fifth dimensional planet, fifth dimensional soul, to being a seventh dimensional Gaia. So there is the ability and the action to go forward. In terms of humanity itself, what I understand is that there have been several races of humanity, and I'm not going to try to go through them all without getting out a chart, but you look at the first real race of humanity that came to Earth was non-physical. It was basically seventh dimensional Lemurian energy, where the physical body wasn't that physical at that point. It was more spiritual. And as we go forward in the future, we've had the kind of a decline from that original Lemurian human that was very spiritual, not very physical, all the way down to one of the most dense physical challenging environments in the entire universe, and maybe even the cosmos and the multiverses. It doesn't get much more difficult to go forward as a soul. You're seeing some of the hardest things to go forward in positivity, in spirituality. And as we come out of this, we are going to enter into a phase where people are going to be really happy about where we're at, where we're going from here.
I love that. It makes me think of a term I've heard a lot from other researchers and whatnot, just referring to Earth as Earth School, the school for souls and a place of learning but also experience. And when I heard a really wonderful analogy that sometimes I think about when I'm having a hard day, which is, if you think about what you just mentioned, Martin, the density of this planet, the density and the challenge, there's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of suffering and challenge to go through on this planet. And yet, our souls can still feel love and we can still practice kindness. And you still see a lot of kindness and a lot of wonderful things, even amongst all this craziness happening every day with people. And that to me just shows how incredibly powerful we all are to be able to still function and be pretty okay and loving and kind still with all this craziness going on. So one of the analogies I heard is that Earth is one of the top most intense but highly, let's say, revered experiences for souls because of the difficulty level, like a game, right? If you can play a master chess game at that masterful level, that's pretty impressive. That's pretty awesome. What do you think about that concept and like Earth is for our souls? Is it a school and is it a hard one to get into?
As far as how hard it is to get into, I don't know. I think my soul has been here for quite a while here on Earth. I have definite memories of Lyra and of Sirius and maybe some memories from Orion. But I came here a long time ago, not long after Sanat Kumara took over as a Logos. I came in to help with that project. It's it's challenging. I really think this is about as challenging as it gets. And it's really the last 12,000 years. I mean, there was some problems that caused or went hand in hand with the fall of Atlantis. But for like the last 12,000 years, since we've been in this hard third density, this is about as difficult and ugly as it gets. And as you say, Chris, there's so much beauty that's still going on now. And that's what gives me hope and really gets me excited every day is knowing that positivity, that energy, it exists now. It's not just waiting for, the next big golden age to come in and then everything just is magically made better. There's people making a difference now. And it really comes down to each person. If you're positive, if you're shining a bright light every day, even if you don't do anything other than being kind to people when you're going to the grocery store, you can raise the frequency of the earth. And I think that's super important.
I love that, and it's so important to mention, this is small acts that all of us can do. It doesn't have to be so grand and monumental to make it a positive impact. Now, you're making me think of Atlantis, of course, and which is connected to ancient Egypt, and it's always so hard to say what's what, of course, with that whole situation. But from your research and of course your memories, Martin, your other memories of other lifetimes and whatnot on this planet, what is your perception of what happened with Atlantis 12,500 years ago, approximately? What happened and what was that civilization at the time? What was it like?
What I see when I look at that part of Atlantis, and my memories on Atlantis is something that I'm really working on. It's something that's been, I don't want to say denied to me, but it's not the thing that is being given to me because I have to work for it. And one of the pieces was as I was going through this lifetime, I had a very Atlantean view. I came out of school as an engineer, and I did my career in the Army. And so I was very technical, very pro technology, pro um, data. I was not very big on the arts. If someone had said, "Hey, I'm a candidate for office, and I want to slash the arts. I want to slash all this spending on touchy-feely stuff in our government," I would have been all for that in my late 20s and early 30s. With time and understanding, I can see, yeah, that's probably not the greatest place to be at in terms of compassion and seeing the beauty in the world. So what I see, there was multiple Atlantises. You can't just see it as a singular item or a singular existence. But for the last one, for the last big fall, it came down to that choice between matter and spirit, the technology for doing the things that are ethereal and loving and spiritual. And a lot of the matter and the technology won. So you had the accident that's been talked about. And I think you also just had, literally, from a grander scheme, it was like, okay, yeah, this isn't working. It's time to do a reset, and let's look at something else. Let's look at how humans can evolve and exist in this lower, because that was kind of a fifth dimensional existence. Let's drop it down to the third dimension, and we'll see how things go from there. So I think that there's a bigger hand really pushing our experience. Can't say that, it's this or that, but that's what I feel is going on. Is that last 12,000 years out of several 100,000 years of humans has been our chance to really get in here and really experience the worst of things.
Yeah, that sounds like it. In our history, even the conventional mainstream history doesn't miss that. It's pretty evident just looking at a very bloody history, and certainly a decline in consciousness. You can absolutely see it, and at the same time, I see spikes of almost like revivals of these things throughout those 12,000 years that you can see pop up and then kind of get squashed down throughout history, which is also very, very interesting. What has been your perspective on the last 12,000 years, Martin, where we have obviously gone into a decline? You mentioned obviously it's hard to know who's really guiding that per se, but what is it just humans involved in this? Is there other beings involved in this decline? And where are we now at with that? As an example, I mean, I do hear a lot about other beings like these Draco reptilians as one example of beings that have repressed a lot and have contributed a lot to this darker period of time in our history. But I'm sure there's a lot more going on than that.
From my understanding and from the other Melchizedeks that I speak with, certainly the negative reptilians have had a not great um, effect on humanity. And now I don't like to judge them. I don't like to judge anything or anyone at all. So I see their influence as very negative, and I understand it started during that very last phase of Atlantis and was part of what pushed that technology and matter focused element of Atlantis to go so hard that way and not spiritually. So this is an extension of what happened at the end of Atlantis. And so I think that each of us has our own opportunity to see the negativity, to feel that negativity, and just say, no, that's not for me. And my understanding is that there is still some that's out there. And maybe part of what you could do if you wanted is see it as role players. I don't know if the reptilians are necessarily role players per se, but some of the humans today, I absolutely believe, are here on this planet doing the role playing to show us what we don't want. So that if we went into, say, the Baskin Robbins and there was 31 flavors of existence, they're showing us 5 or 6 or 12 that we just don't want anything to do with. And that's giving us an opportunity to choose better. And that's how I like to see the reptilians. And yeah, I'm not a big fan of them, but that's okay.
That's okay, and I appreciate the non-judgment because, of course, they're beings too. And I've heard some interesting things about the Draco reptilians. Perhaps, one of the things I've heard is that they many millions of years ago, or even more, they lost their homes at one point, and they came from a really challenging past, and were obviously very traumatized themselves as a species. So, as we know through basic psychology, hurt people, and even these real negative beings, they are the way they are for a reason, and not that it condones that behavior, but it makes sense as to the role they play in a dualistic reality, of course. And like you said, the humans, of course, playing out this role perfectly on this planet as well. There's many of them we see on the news every day who are obviously playing a role clearly,
Right.
and that goes back to the analogy of we're all actors in a play, right? Where
Yes.
Plato talks about that, and many others, where this is again going back to our consciousness discussion. So with all that, Martin, where do you feel that we are now at a point where in 2026 during this recording, are we past that threshold of still in the old world? Even though we're seeing a lot of chaos, do you feel that on a consciousness level, we're well on our way now into this transitional phase to the golden age?
I believe that that is a big yes. People who actually track numbers of the percentage of people who are awakening say we're past the tipping point. We are in a place where it's going to happen. Things are lined up and it's going forward. I don't worry about where we're at. I believe it's going to happen. I'm convinced it's going to go forward. In my discussions with Gaia, she says, we're there, we're going. And so it's just a matter of living out this next 5 or 10 years and doing our best, really trying hard, not taking it for granted, and just making the most of this last really rough period as we get ready to live in the better period.
100%. I love that. And on that note, Martin, it'd be great if you have any advice for our audience in terms of more human practical things we can take, whether they're spiritual tools or just anything that you've found has really helped you on your journey of ascension, coming into these understandings that you think would help others, in this transitional time, especially this next 10 or so years that we're moving through. What have you found helps you? What helps regulate you, ground you, keep you in a healthy mind, body, soul situation?
Okay, great question, Chris. I would say that the first thing is to understand you create your own reality and just accept the fact that you are a beautiful, perfect fractal of source. You create your own reality. And every day you get up, you have the opportunity when you get up. If you have a mirror, you can look in the mirror and say, am I going to be in a good mood today? Or is this going to be a day where I'm just pissed off about this, that, or the other thing? Am I going to allow something that goes sideways to upset me? And in particular, as you look at trying to live with unconditional love for everything, for all other people, for animals, you've got to start with yourself. That's the most important thing. It's a lot like the airlines where if there's a problem with the pressure in the cabin, the mask drop down, they say, put yours on first because you're no good to anyone else when you pass out. So it's the same thing. Learn to have unconditional love for yourself. That's not to say to be a narcissist or get out of balance, but understand that, yes, it's okay. You're okay. Anything that might have been a flaw you might have perceived as, boy, I wish I was this, I wish I had that, that doesn't matter. You're beautiful and you're perfect, and you will make the choices that go forward. And so that also involves unconditional forgiveness for everyone you interact with, starting with yourself. Don't hold on to pain. Don't hold on to guilt. Find a way to let it go. And in the most perfect sense, you can take all those negative memories and figure out a way to make them positive, to make them something where you had an experience that sets you up so that you could do well in the future. Don't look at it as this was really awful. And now, part of that that's really tough in this third dimension is, as you say, in the school house of earth, we get such strong relationships with family, with friends. And when you lose family or you lose friends, that's one of the most hard things to really see it, take that big step back and see it from the multidimensional point of, okay, so that soul that I loved, they're off to do something else now. They're not really gone. They're not really dead. They're just doing something else. And when you can become comfortable with that, then I think it's really easier to have true balance for yourself.
I love that, Martin. Thank you for sharing that. It's so true, right? It's that classic analogy: put on the oxygen mask first, and we need to always be looking after ourselves first and foremost, not in a narcissistic way, just in a honestly healthy, basic way that I think a lot of us have lost touch with self love, and we've got into a pretty pessimistic, self deprecating type of society because that was how you become a better person and how you
Right.
become a harder worker and all that kind of stuff, and ultimately not so great, not so helpful. And I appreciate that. I think, people need, and what I liked also what you mentioned was the multidimensional perspective, especially when it comes to tragedies when you lose somebody you love. That's happening a lot right now. I mean, people are always, of course, dying, but I've been noticing a real, like, a lot of my friends are losing loved ones on a, let's say, faster rate. Don't know why, but there seems to be a departure of more souls these days, and I've heard some theories about some souls are we're at a pinnacle time where they're deciding, do I want to stay for the rest of this ascension? Do I want to move on to another project, as you mentioned? Which I really like that perspective. What do you think is going on, regardless of how many souls and whatnot are departing, but when they are right now making that decision, maybe on a soul subconscious level, to leave this body, what is happening with that? Is there something on a collective level going on right now where people are maybe making a choice of a timeline?
I definitely see that, Chris, as part of it, both a timeline choice, but also as Gaia's vibration rises, as Gaia goes from lower third density up into the fourth density, and as we're going towards that fifth dimensional Gaia, it's uncomfortable for souls that are vibrating at a lower level. It just, you become out of phase with the existence of the planet. And so that's part of the reason some souls will make that choice. Also, I think a lot of those choices are made pre-birth. So I think they're simply reaching a decision point and saying, yes, I saw that coming, and I'm going to go for something different, because what's coming next isn't the experience that I'm looking for in terms of soul growth and soul journey.
Yeah, makes sense. Totally makes sense. And I remember I was watching this Disney movie called Soul. It's actually a really great movie, and I found really depicts what it could be like as a soul deciding to take your next life, and what you want. And I've heard things like you get to choose your parents, who you're born into, and all
Right.
that. From your experience, Martin, is that the case? Like, when we pass on, when we quote unquote die, our physical vessels die and our soul moves on, from your understanding, is that process? Do we immediately go to choose our next life? Is there a life review that we hear about? What's that process like, from your understanding, of course?
Yeah, in my understanding, I believe that there's definitely a soul review. And one of the first most important steps is that the soul comes out of this experience and basically takes just a nice shower. Any yuckiness, any negativity that was attached from this life just gets washed away right up front. And then you can go in and have a very mature soul review and look at how things went and what it is that you wanted to do, what you did do, and what would be the way to expand and go forward.
Fascinating. I've never heard the shower one, but that's actually interesting. It makes sense that you would want to cleanse yourself, because then that made me think, though, that there's a lot of practitioners out there that do this quote unquote past life regressions, past life healing, or parallel life, depending on how you want to look at it. So that, to me, implies that the soul can sometimes take traumas from multiple lifetimes into quote unquote future lifetimes.
Right.
Is that from your understanding still a thing, or does that
That is
shower
that
help?
is absolutely my understanding. I think both goes on. It's not a this or that. It's a this and that. The soul still has a memory, and there's still past life trauma that has to be healed. And now part of that is those other lives are going on right now. And so that pain is still out there. So the soul itself may get some relief from that as it prepares to transition, but on the bigger scale, it's still out there until you heal it and until you deal with it.
Makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it's fascinating. Well, as we start to wrap up and get closer to the end of this podcast, I would love to know, with your work, Martin, what are you focused on? I know you touched a little bit on it, what you've been wanting to work on more, but what are you focused on for the future, for your work and for humanity? What do you see that is something that you're going to be needing to put more time into, or something that you're going to be conveying more to the world with regards to your work? And how does that relate to this ascension and bringing in the golden age?
Okay, several of the things, Chris, that I'm doing in terms of my soul purpose, and I'm really starting, and like literally today is one of the bigger transitions from preparatory to action mode with the eclipse this morning, with some of the things that are going on at this particular now moment. So, a big one is anchoring the energy of my monad into the human collectiveness. And it has to do with passing on the belief that you're perfect, understanding that you can do and be anything that you need to be. You can have the ability to rise above, to be kind, to be gentle, to make yourself the anchor of your world, and so that you can be ready to go when it's time for the next ascension process or going into that golden age. Another piece that I'm working, this is something I'm doing with Archangel Metatron, is trying to anchor in the transition from what has been a 7-ray world, a 7-ray Gaia, into a 12-ray Gaia, 12-ray world. And those rays are, if you're not familiar with them, are the ways that energy has stepped down from source, going through the planetary logos, and then out to humanity itself. So you look at what are some of the characteristics of human existence, and each of those rays has a different color and has a different set of strengths and weaknesses. And you can see a parallel view of this as when, if you're familiar with astrology, the Western astrology, and the life lessons and the things that you learn and the things that you need to work on. The rays have a lot of energy, and they will have usually an ascended master working to bring that aspect of humanity forward, whether it's getting our religious views under control so that we're not tribalized and angry in our religion, but being more spiritual and being more compassionate. And so those are two of the big ones. Let me see if I've got anything else I wanted to touch on there. Oh yeah, the other big one that I'm going to be working on is trying to bring out for the male collective, the divine masculine, letting people know, letting people see and understand that it's okay to not be this old, harsh, third-dimensional male, to go from the quote-unquote alpha male, but to go to the kind, compassionate, strong male who is in balance with the feminine side, with the divine feminine. And so balancing the divine masculine and the divine feminine, that's one of the big things for me in this lifetime.
Amazing. I love that, Martin. Yeah, and it's such a valid point. I mean, we can see it so much right now in our world with the masculine and feminine polarities and the challenges that I mean, just so many men and women face because of the imbalances with the masculine and feminine as energies within our specific genders and whatnot. And I think an understanding that it's nice that people are starting to come to an understanding of masculine and feminine, but beyond the physical into an energetic standpoint, because we all have the masculine and the feminine within us. And the more we can heal those parts of ourselves, the more we can, of course, heal that relationship with the other, the feminine and or the masculine. So 100%, this is really, really important work. This is fantastic. I loved our conversation today, and if you've left us with some wonderful wisdom, if you could just do us one more favor for the audience, and just anything that comes to mind that you think people need to hear right now. We're recording this at the end of February or mid-February of 2026. What does humanity need to know right now or need to hear from you, and what words of wisdom would you say to our audience for getting through this next, like, let's call it a little hurdle on our evolution?
Sure. Chris, the first thing I would say is just be kind to yourself, be gentle with yourself. If you have a bad day, if things don't go your way, if you do something that you would prefer not to have done, don't get into guilt, don't beat yourself up, and just live in unconditional love, unconditional forgiveness, and don't judge anything or anyone. Those are really the big things in an elevator speech that I'd give you.
I love it. Thank you. That's fantastic. So where can our audience connect with you, Martin? Where can they learn more about you? I know you've got some books out there as well. So could you let us know where can people connect and get your work?
Sure. I've got 2 books that I've written articles for. They're anthologies that are put out by the Awakened Hearts magazine. So if you were to go to Amazon and search in the Amazon book section for Kindle, Awakened Hearts, and David Trotter is the guy running the Awakened Hearts effort. If you search his name in the books, you can find my 2 books. The first book talks about my origin story, and it also talks about some key things on not being judgmental and forgiving yourself. The second book has really kind of a template. If you want to live on heaven on earth, it gives you 10 or 12 pages, whatever it is, of, hey, here's some things to consider and to really look after. My website is Larimar Dragon, and it's there. There'll be more in it in the future, and I'll have more on Instagram coming out. And once it's out, it'll be out.
Fantastic. And of course, as everyone knows, that'll be in the show notes below, so you guys can check out Martin's work and connect with him. If his message and whatnot resonates with you, definitely reach out. And thank you so much, Martin, for being on the show today. This was a really fascinating conversation, and my mind's very full, so I've got some great things to chew on later today. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you.
All right. I appreciate being here, Chris. This was great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, that's Martin Melchizedek, and that's just a fascinating conversation. Wow. So many things to consider, so many things to look forward to, and so many perspectives, specifically around death, the other life, reincarnation, parallel past lives. I love it. This is why we do the podcast here. It's fantastic. Just a quick reminder for our audience, our sponsor, the Therapeutic Music Library. The link below, if you're looking for any therapeutic music for your business, for your practice, for your clients, this is a royalty-free library of therapeutic music designed for coaches and therapists, essentially, or anyone that's working with others and uses music as a therapeutic tool. This allows you to do it with a nice license, a lifetime license that just allows you to not have to think about any of the legal sides of that. And you can use it for whatever you want. Now, our other sponsor is our Sacred Site annual trip, of course, with Ancient Mysteries on Earth. We've got Egypt coming up this year in September. We'll be going to some amazing sites with Mohammed Ibrahim, the incredible Egyptologist, and we'll be getting private access to lots of sites like the Great Pyramid, the Sphinx. Even at Karnak Temple, we'll be getting private access with the with the statue of Sekhmet, where all those supernatural photographs were taken that went viral a couple of years ago, and so much more, so much more. So if you want to check out that, look in the show notes below. We got links to everything. And as always, most importantly, have a beautiful rest of your day. Sending you so much love from myself to you. And we will catch you in the next episode of Ancient Mysteries Unearthed. Until next time.